The United States and Russia are at war. Do you realize how this is going to end? You do realize, don't you? Joe Biden has just made a surprise visit to Kiev, during which he announced that the U.S. is going to be involved for, quote, as long as it takes, end quote, to win the war against Russia. Meanwhile, the Russians have now pulled together far more forces than they originally invaded Ukraine with a year ago. They intend to fight for as long as it takes too. There are no peace negotiations, and there are not going to be any peace negotiations. Both sides are counting on the other side to eventually back down. But what happens if both sides just keep escalating matters until a point of no return is reached? After what we have seen, countless other world leaders visit Ukraine via Kiev over the past year, Joe Biden finally mustered the courage to make the trek himself, and the mainstream media is making a really big deal out of it. The U.S. will back Ukraine in the fight against Russia for as long as it takes, President Joe Biden said, as he made an announcement and symbolic visit to the capital, Kiev. We have every confidence you're going to continue to prevail, he said. Mr. Biden's first trip to Ukraine as president came days before the first anniversary of Russia's invasion. During his visit, Biden announced even more aid for Ukraine, but we have already given $196 billion in aid to the Ukrainians. And that's just the American aid. Now, according to the Ukrainian government, the U.S. leads all countries with $196 billion in total military, financial, and humanitarian aid to Ukraine between January 24, 2022 through November 20, 2022. How much more will we give them during the coming year? Sadly, the truth is that we are providing far more funding for this war than anyone else, and that includes the Ukrainians. Vast armies of foreign mercenaries are being hired using our tax dollars, and those foreign mercenaries have become more critical than ever because Ukrainians are literally running out of warm bodies to throw into the meat grinder in eastern Ukraine. We're also providing more weapons, more equipment, and more ammunition than anyone else, but the Ukrainians are blowing through the ammo even faster than we can make it. Inside a sprawling factory just off the President Biden Expressway in downtown Scranton, Pennsylvania, the future arsenal of Ukraine's war effort is being forged, one red-hot artillery shell at a time. Running full tilt, as it was on a recent January morning, the Scranton Army ammunition plant churns out roughly 11,000 artillery shells a month. That may seem like a lot, but the Ukrainian army often fires that many shells in just over a few days. In addition, the U.S. military actually gives the Ukrainians specific coordinates of Russians' targets or where Russian targets are located so that the Ukrainians can fire rockets that we have provided to them at those targets. The Washington Post reported Thursday that Ukraine is reliant on coordinates provided or confirmed by the U.S. and its allies to launch strikes using the U.S.-provided Highmark rocket systems, a revelation that demonstrates Washington's deep involvement in the war. The Highmark is a precision-guided artillery system, one that Ukraine has employed quite a bit in its fight against Russia. One example is the January 1 Highmark strike on a facility housing Russian forces in Donetsk, and one of the deadliest Ukrainian attacks of the war. Citing 3 unnamed Ukrainian officials and 1 unnamed U.S. official, the Post reported that Ukraine also relies on the U.S. for targeting coordinates for similar precision weapons, including the M270 multiple launch rocket system. One senior Ukrainian official said that Ukrainian forces almost never launch strikes using these weapons without coordinates provided by U.S. military personnel that are located at a military base in a different country in Europe. This is our war now. No matter how much our politicians try to spin it, this has become a war between the United States and Russia, and it appears that Russians are preparing to take things to a whole new level. Right now, very large concentrations of Russian troops are poised to come pouring into Ukraine from the north. And recently, we've had a first ever confirmation that actual photographic evidence of Russia forced buildings on Ukraine's border, resembling those of pre-February 2022. And there are satellite photos of them. There are reportedly such camps in Kursk and Voronezh regions, which are directly above Sumy and Kharkov oblasts of Ukraine. And to support those troops, the Russians are constructing large field hospitals near the Ukrainian border, just like they did prior to the original invasion. There are now several reports of large field hospitals being constructed in at least 2 different regions, again reminiscent of exactly what happened last time prior to the start of the SMO, and the senior lieutenant of the AFU stated that 10,000 Russian troops have amassed across the border from Sumy. There are also very large concentrations of Russian troops in the south. I expect that the Russians will soon formally declare war against Ukraine, and any pretense of playing nice will finally be discarded. On the Ukrainian side, one official made headlines all over the globe when he declared that tanks will be parked on Moscow's Red Square, and that will be justice. Kiev's security chief vowed that Ukraine's tanks will be parked on Moscow's Red Square, and that will be justice ahead of the first anniversary of Putin's invasion. Oleksiy Danilov, Kiev's National Security and Defense Council boss, called Vladimir Putin's Hitler's twin as he reiterated Ukraine's ambition to expel all Russian troops from its soil, including from Crimea, which was annexed by Moscow in 2014. Now, I don't know what sort of fantasy world he's living in, because the Russians would launch their nukes long before that ever happens. If push comes to shove, Russia will resort to a nuclear war. And here's the Western world, our experts keep assuring us that the Russians would never actually do that. But the Russians keep making it very clear that they are quite serious about their threats. Russia is attempting to use this nuclear threat to weaken international support for Ukraine, according to Kiev intelligence. The official Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reported via telegram that Russia has started large-scale exercises involving strategic nuclear forces stationed for launch by air, land and sea, and put its units on the highest alert. Now, in my book, I explain why the U.S. is not at all prepared for a nuclear conflict with Russia, but most Americans don't care to listen to warnings from me or from anyone else about this. Most Americans are just assuming that our leaders know exactly what they're doing and that everything is going to be just fine. Once upon a time, Barack Obama warned that we should never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to mess things up. And now we've reached a point where there is very little possibility that Joe Biden could get the majority of the U.S. population killed in a cataclysmic war. There's a very real possibility. This is not going to end well, and I would urge you to prepare accordingly. And this is by Michael Snyder. He says it's finally here. Michael's new book entitled End Times is now available in paperback and for Kindle on Amazon. About the author, my name is Michael. My brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. And in addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing. And one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I have published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the Most Important News. And the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is by Michael Snyder on the Economic Collapse blog. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.